we all get to decide how we live our life, what we want to do, who we want to be. I mean, there are things that happen to us and things that we can't control. And I think that for me, this part of me was not something that I chose. I feel very strongly that this isn't something that I elected to have in any way in this life. But what I also feel very strongly about is that I get to decide every day what I do with it and how I interact with this part of me and every part of me, honestly.
Hello, and welcome to the Complex Couples Podcast. I'm Heidi. I'm a couples therapist and relationship coach specializing in mixed orientation marriages and mixed gender identity relationships. Whether you're just discovering this reality or you've been on this journey for a long time, this is the space where your marriage matters, your values matter, and your choices matter. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Complex Couples Podcast. I'm so excited today because I have a very important guest, and I think his opinion is really valuable and his views are really important to this podcast. And so today I've brought my husband to Complex Couples. Thank you for being here, Daniel. I'm really excited about this.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So obviously our stories are intertwined. I can't really tell my story without telling his to some degree. I try to stay on my side of the street as much as I can, but it's not really possible because they are very intertwined. And so today I just thought I'd invite him here to share a little bit about his experience and also to talk about how he feels about me being more public than maybe he ever anticipated being with this experience. So thanks, Daniel. Really excited. So maybe if you could just start by sharing a little about your experience with same-sex attraction, maybe how you talk about it, what terms you use when you talk about it, and what's brought you here today.
Well, the terms, that's an interesting place to start because I think as we talk about it and you hear me talk, I'll bounce around and use different terms because I really alter it based on the audience and based on the message that I'm trying to convey. Because I think a lot of people have a lot of meaning they attach to different words. And so I use different words on an ongoing basis. So for me today, I will frequently use the word gay when I'm talking to individuals that I haven't talked to about this a lot because it conveys something that is easily understandable. But the problem is it also comes generally with a lot of other meaning that I don't necessarily intend.
Meaning like an assumption that probably a little bit of a, well, how can your wife be involved in that to some degree?
I think that's confusing for people. Same-sex attraction or same-gender attraction is a word that I don't think is really broadly known or used. I mean, it's in smaller circles, and so it's understandable, though, to people. And so sometimes I'll use that, but I don't really love the term. And so generally, I'm pretty generic about it. I just talk about the fact that I am naturally attracted to men, and then I can explain what it is to be me outside of that.
Yeah, I love that you say that because it's a part of you and it's an important part of you. I think that that's really important to acknowledge that that is an important part of you, and yet it is not all of you. And I remember when you told me about your same-sex attraction, that's how you portrayed it. You talked about how you were a lot of things. There were a lot of different parts of you, and this was one part that you had not shared with me. I remember that.
Yeah, and I think it's because we all are made up of a massive number of parts, right? And those different parts play different roles in our lives, and sometimes they take more key roles than they do at other times in our lives. But I think they're all really, really important, and I think it's important to honor all of us. And this part of me has definitely been a part that at times in my life has taken center stage. I oftentimes think about it as a play. I mean, there can be key roles and people that we see a lot, like in a play or in a movie. There are a lot of other supporting roles, and sometimes those roles change, right? Some people will be more prominent during parts of the show, and some people, kind of fade into the background. And I think our parts are like that. And so I think it's important to recognize that we are the sum of a lot of parts.
I'm curious how actually that part has shown up differently throughout your life and how coming out has impacted that for
Hmm.
you.
Well, I think for most of my life, I tried to pretend that that part didn't exist, right? I mean, I definitely pretty early, probably in teen years, recognized that there was something there, but tried to convince myself that it was a passing phase or something that would just go away when I got older or something that would disappear, when I was married or something like that. It kind of evolved throughout time. And so I spent most of my life trying to ignore it and pretend like it didn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, you've told me this before. You said you were going to die with this secret. This was like not something you planned on revealing to anyone. And now here we are talking about it on a podcast, right? So, not where you thought you would be. How do you feel like it's impacted you to actually open up and allow this to be a part of
Hmm.
you in a more open way?
Well, I think it changed everything for me in my life. I think for a long time when things are kept in darkness or in secret, they become big and they become uncontrollable. They might become even all consuming. And so, I talked about our different parts taking different roles in our life and sometimes more prominent. I think when we try to hide things and they're fear-based or shame-based, they have a tendency to grow. And so I think for a long time it was there, but it just kept kind of growing. And I'd experienced it through feelings and thoughts and kind of obsessions with it for a really long time. And then once I was open about it and came out and started talking to friends and family about it, it started after a time to take its place.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's a really important part of my life, but it doesn't take over
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Do you mind telling our audience about who you first opened up to and maybe why you decided to disclose
Mm-hmm.
that and how that went?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important part, I think, of my story. When I talk about it, like things in darkness have a tendency to grow. And it was a period of my life where it was showing up more and more and more. Again, I really didn't have any intentions of changing the way I lived my life. I very intentionally chose to be married and be married to someone I love and someone I love being with and create a really beautiful family. And that was really important to me. So I never planned on changing those things, but it was showing up more often. I was probably thinking about it more. It seemed to be kind of calling to me more during a period of time.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second and ask if you can be a little more specific for our audience, meaning where did you see it showing up?
Yeah. It showed up in a lot of places. When you ask that question, the first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is like it would show up even in airports. There were definitely people that would be walking through an airport, men that would be looking, for other men. And that could happen like in the hallways of the airport, it could happen in the restrooms of the airport. And I think because I was thinking about it and engaging in thought around it, I was susceptible to that stuff. And so like it would draw me in. And although I never stepped in and did anything with anyone in the airport, the draw was strong.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of really bothersome to me that it would happen in places like that, just random people, in random places. And then, pornography was never like a massive, like, draw and part of my life, but it definitely was there and it would show up. And so, like, that would show up, at times it would come and go and come and go and kind of be a draw in that way. And so I think those were probably the most, and then just in thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about it a lot. And where really what the trigger was is I was at a point in my life that even though I decided that I was going to stay in the life that I had chosen and I didn't want to depart it, I was worried that the draw was getting too big and too strong and that I would somehow be pulled into it. And I just decided at that point in time that it was really important that I have someone that I could talk to. And I had a really close friend who God sent to live by me in Omaha. And, I'd been friends with him in college. And then when we came to Omaha and he was here, he just seemed like the natural choice. I mean, he was probably the closest friend that I've ever had and still is, I think, to this day, and someone that I felt really comfortable sharing a lot of things with. And so I decided that at this time he was potentially moving away. And I decided this was going to be a lot easier conversation to have in person. And so I just basically needed him to know so that if I ever needed him, I didn't have to call him on phone across the country and try to explain the situation.
Right. So, how did that help? I mean, you've said that essentially this part of you has kind of taken a not such a prominent role since that time. What about talking to this friend was helpful to you?
Well, I would say when I started talking about it, it took more of a prominent role
Mm.
for a period of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because for a period of time, and it was a long period of time. I mean, it really it came out more then to where it became more of a topic of conversation, obviously. So I would talk to him about it. I would think about it more. And slowly over time, there were a couple other friends that I ended up talking to as well. One in particular who I had not seen or known or met for a long time. I met him years ago in high school, actually. And just through Facebook posts, I recognized that he was running support groups for people in similar situations that I was in. And so I figured that he also experienced same sex attraction. And so I reached out to him and he was also really helpful. But during this entire period of time, like I was talking about it a lot more and thinking a lot more about it.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened is it became more of a normalized part of me.
Okay.
And so it wasn't something that was hidden. And so it didn't carry as much shame
Okay.
like anymore. And then the other thing that I started recognizing is I talked with these friends about my experience, especially my best friend who I talked to who is straight. I started recognizing a lot of things that I attached to same-sex attraction, he experienced also. And so all of a sudden, I recognized that I probably overly attached struggles and difficulties I had in my life to this part that probably weren't related to it at all.
Okay. So you're saying that he might experience a draw to someone maybe of the opposite gender as well. And it was more about kind of honoring the choices that you both had made to be committed to a partner. Is that
Yeah.
the right idea?
Yeah, I think so. And then the other thing is, I think that the sexual feelings and lust are a human experience,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so they're a human experience. And I thought that because I was gay, that they were uniquely mine,
Mm-hmm.
or they were an experience that I was having because I had chosen to spend my life with a woman instead of a man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then through conversations, I recognized that, like, oh no, that's actually not the case. That's actually probably just part of the human experience. And sometimes we recognize things and desire things that are outside of the, the authorized or the proper or whatever
Right.
way we've
Socially
chosen to live our
acceptable or
lives.
whatever, right?
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people might say to you that you aren't being true to yourself, right?
Mm.
That's a common response. How do you respond to that when someone says that to you? And also keep space for someone who has chosen a different path than you.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I want to make sure that people never view me as trying to be prescriptive on like how they should live their life. I believe that we have free will to live as ever we want, however we want to live in our life. And I think that we should honor that and respect that in people. And I ask for the same respect, for me, because obviously I've chosen a path that's different than other people. Now, one thing that I truly, and I think that drives a lot of who I am and how I am is I believe in self-determination. We all get to decide how we live our life, what we want to do, who we want to be. I mean, there are things that happen to us and things that we can't control. And I think that for me, this part of me was not something that I chose. I didn't. I feel very strongly that this isn't something that I elected to have in any way in this life. But what I also feel very strongly about is that I get to decide every day what I do with it and how I interact with this part of me and every part of me, honestly. And so we get to self-determine. And so for me, I think that's been a big driver because yes, am I being true to myself? Absolutely. If I'm living the life that I want to live, that I choose to live. And it's not because, I've been brainwashed into it or forced into it by any means. It's a life that I choose to live. Now, I'd also be a little blind if I didn't recognize that the choices I make are influenced by the teachings that I've been taught throughout my life.
Right.
Right. And so there's definitely influence here based on what I believe and what I hold to be true. And that's a function of my religion, the society I'm in, in the schools I was taught in
Right.
and those things. But I think the most important thing is to recognize that I don't feel forced at all to live the life that I live.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that it is truly my choice
Mm-hmm.
to be where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm realizing how many things there are to cover. I feel like there's so many questions I could ask. That one thought that came to mind is how I think sometimes when we make certain choices, we can feel threatened by other people's choices. And I'm thinking, like when I was in grad school, I had a supervisor, and this was kind of during that time that you had shared with me your experience with same-sex attraction, and I always joke that my judgment of or my sin of choice is judgment, right? And I think it led me to kind of judge his choice to be in a relationship with a man. And he also kind of judged my choice of and your choice, right, of being in a relationship with each other. But like he really taught me something towards the end. He was my supervisor for a while, and towards the end of my time there, I felt very seen when he said to me, "Wow, this must be really difficult for you and your husband. I bet you're not very accepted for this choice that you're making." And it was really reassuring, really comforting to hear that from someone who was making a different choice than me.
Mm-hmm.
And it really made me think I want to honor that for other people too, right?
Yeah.
I want to give him the same respect that like our choices are different, and it's easy to say one is right and one is wrong, but there's a lot of difficulty in determining which part are we authentic to, right? Like there's a lot of parts of us and we all have to choose
Yeah.
some parts over others.
Well, I mean, there's a couple things there. I think that society makes a lot of things hard, especially when we start attaching labels to things. And that's why the words, I think, can be somewhat challenging to use, because how I may think about and define gay might be very different than other people, right? And even how I might think about being in a mixed orientation marriage might be different than how other people think about it.
Right.
And again, labels they're important for many reasons. First of all, we can convey a lot of information really quickly to someone, but it's not complete, right? I often think about it, like even when I tell people I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that comes with a lot of information really quickly. And it's not all accurate, right?
Meaning a lot of assumptions, you
There's a
mean?
lot of assumptions that go in there, because like one of the assumptions may be like, you don't drink caffeine, and I kind of like Pepsi, and like, and I drink it sometimes. And so like, if that's what they're getting out of it, like they're wrong, right?
Right.
And then, but sometimes we also feel forced into whatever that box is when we start using the label.
Right.
And I think
right.
for a long time, when I was more open and I started talking about this and I was using the various terms, I started feeling that I was being forced into a box. And when I was being forced into a box, I felt like I had to take on those characteristics, and I was trying to figure out like, well, what does this mean to be a Latter-day Saint and a husband and father and gay and all these things? And so I was trying to search out and try to talk to other people and see how they defined it. And it was putting a lot of stress on me, right? And then I think judgment that you asked about here at the beginning, that starts showing up, because then I start judging others based on how they're living according to this box that I'm creating. And I remember really struggling with it and talking to a therapist that I had started meeting with after I had opened up to you. And he just kind of stopped me and he's like, I really just want Daniel to be cool with being Daniel. And as simple as that message was, it changed everything for me. At that point, I felt that I could shed labels, and I got to do this however I wanted to do this. And by giving myself that freedom, I was able to turn around and give that freedom to everyone else also.
Interesting.
And so then my judgment fell away, and I recognized, no, this other, whoever I was interacting with, they get to do this however they want to do this as well. So anyways, that helped a lot.
Yeah. I think as a spouse of someone who experiences same-sex attraction, I think there can be a feeling of my spouse is only here because they have to be, right? So the things that you're saying, we know you also have I know you also have a very strong independent part, right? A very strong kind of freedom part. And so I think that there are times where you may have felt trapped in this marriage, but it was more because not so much of same-sex attraction, but, commitments can feel trapping. And so we do have to kind of confront the reality of I'm not trapped here. I can leave. And if I make a different choice, then I think for me, coming to terms with that is the reality in every marriage, because I was really scared. Like when you first told me, it put me in a place of, oh, what if he decides he needs a different life, or,
Yeah.
you know, and functioning out of fear was not very helpful to me, I found. So I just really was like, I've got to get to a point where I can tolerate whatever happens, because he does have choice and we all have choice. But you framing it more in terms of choice really helps me as a partner feel more chosen rather than something you have to do.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. I do think that's really important. And I don't think that I've ever felt or taken on that narrative that I'm forced to be here. And you're right. I do have a really independent part. And if
you
someone
do
tried to
too.
say like, you're forced to be here, I'd be like, whatever. I don't have to be here if I don't want to be here, you know? And like, and I'm very stubborn that way. Right. And I think, you know, that's something that we've had to navigate in our relationship is try to figure
Definitely.
out, because I think where we have struggled oftentimes is when you have been concerned and tried to solve the problem through a little bit of force
Right.
and through a little bit
Absolutely.
of like asserting your, you know, your control. And then I rebel against that pretty strongly,
Right.
right? And decide that like, you know, you can't tell me what to do to myself.
Right.
And you know, I think that that's an important, you know, maybe a topic for another day, but I think when we recognized, or when I think I recognized, this was a really hard part of our marriage too, though. But when I recognized when we were trying to figure out our love balance
Yeah.
for a period of
Right.
time, I think there was this narrative that, you know, you loved me more than I loved you. And that even became a little stronger after
Yeah. After you
I came out.
disclosed. Mm-hmm.
And I think one day when you pressed me on that question and I acknowledged like and I misspoke, right? I said, yes, I think you do love me more than I love you. And you're like, well, what do you love most? And I had to really think about it for a minute. And I finally realized that it was my freedom.
So my question was, what do you love more,
Yeah.
essentially, than you love me? And I was trying to figure this out for couples, because this is a dynamic I see in
Yeah.
every couple, right? So this was not just us, but I was really trying to figure out what it is you kind of prioritized.
So you're like, yeah, what do you love more? And in the end, the answer, I think I still didn't fully understand it, because I
Yeah.
think
Because
like the
now you
answer,
realize you
my
don't love
first
that more.
answer, well, my first answer that I said was me,
Yes.
right?
Which
It's like,
might have been kind of true.
like it may have been true, but I was like, no, it's me.
Uh,
Like, and then I realized what that meant, you know, in time here was like, no, 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 it's my freedom
right.
that I love the most,
Yeah.
right? And when I started feeling trapped, that's what I rebelled against.
Right.
It was that freedom. And so I think the journey that we've been on here to give each other freedom
Mm-hmm.
and freedom of choice, I mean, maybe the unexpected outcome there was that it drew us closer together,
Right. For sure.
right?
And that was a really crucial point in our marriage that I think it is worth talking about more at a later point in time, because that was very impactful for me as well, trying to grapple with that. But it's a I think something a lot of couples face.
But I think how it's really relevant to this conversation right now is we were grappling with the narrative that I was trapped or you were trapped
Right.
somehow
Right.
within the relationship. And I didn't believe that or feel that way. I think the cultural narrative was pushing on you a lot, that
For
that
sure.
was the truth. And I didn't understand why we were worried about that, you know, at the time, because I didn't
Right.
feel that way.
Right.
And so we were grappling with that. And I think the nice thing is that when we're struggling through that, we recognize that a lot of the things that we were struggling with had nothing to do with same-sex attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these things were just challenges that couples have,
Mm-hmm.
and that they were they were unique to us or anyone that's
Right.
in a mixed orientation marriage. And so I think that was freeing for us to recognize that this was a normal experience, and then for us to also recognize that we were choosing
Mm-hmm.
to be in this relationship. And it's not just me choosing to be here. After I, you know, came to terms with the fact that I experienced same-sex attraction and was willing to talk about it and then share it with you, then you also had to decide
That's
that
right.
you were willing and interested in staying with someone
Right.
who their primary attraction was different than you thought it was.
Right. Yeah, I think that was a big deal. And actually, I really appreciated how lovingly, and another time we'll talk more about how you disclosed this to me, but how lovingly you offered that up front. When you told me, you really presented it in a way that said, hey, I understand if this changes things for you. And now I think you knew me and you knew that it wouldn't change things for me to some degree, which probably made it feel a little safer. But
it was still really scary.
yeah, it was still terrifying. And you still offered that to me. And at that point, I think in my head, I was like, well, why would I let go of something so good, you know? And then there was all the struggles that hit after that, right? As far as grappling with what this meant and the social aspect of how our culture viewed it was probably more what I grappled with than anything else. Okay, so you weren't going to talk about this at all, ever. And now you're talking about it publicly on a podcast. And I'm mindful, this is my own observations of as I tell this story without you there, it often makes people really uncomfortable. Like and as soon as I'll say something like, oh, my husband gave me permission to share this, I can feel like the whole room just relax, right? Like somehow they think I'm just going to talk about this without your permission or out you in some way. So I want to understand more why you chose to allow this to become more public.
Well, I think it would also be helpful to note that this isn't the first time we've talked about it publicly, right? And so I think that's important to note that several years ago we did hold a fireside in our community. And
a fire, for those of you who are listening, a fireside is just like a devotional or a public devotional.
It's a public talk, right? So we just talked about it publicly. And that was really scary. And what I knew was really scary is I had somewhat controlled the message pretty early on, obviously with a small group. And then it was mostly friends and family after I decided to be a little more open. And the reason that I decided to step into the more of the public space was because I think it was really important that people have different types of role models in this space. Back to the freedom choice is like, I really, really want people to recognize that they can live their lives different ways. And the way that we've chosen to live our life is not one that is currently talked about on a really broad basis. And the narrative is quite negative towards, relationships like ours. And so it was really important to me that there be another option out there for people. And so that's why I chose to talk about it then.
And that was what, 2 or 3 years ago?
2 years ago,
now?
I think.
Right.
And that was really freeing to me as well, because now I feel that it's out there, right? So like I can talk about it when it's relevant in a conversation. But what you will see with me too is that I talk about it when it is relevant and helpful, but it's not something that I broadcast on a frequent basis. So even today, I would say that I'm still semi-private about it. People in my life know about it, but not everyone. And there are some people that are really important to me that still don't know, and it's just because it hasn't been relevant yet to the conversation.
Right.
But I think it's really important that I be willing to share so that other people recognize that they have choice and that they recognize that there's self-determination in this part of their lives. And again, not to tell them that they have to live it our way, because they don't have to.
Right.
But if they want to, they can.
It's a possibility.
And they get to live it however they want to live it.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's why I talk about it. But again, I don't talk about it a lot. It's not like everyone at work doesn't know. There are a couple people that know because it's been relevant, but it's not because I've broadcasted there.
Yeah, that makes sense. So having said that, my follow-up question is, so why not come on every podcast episode? Because I know our listeners would absolutely love to have you here. But why are we choosing to kind of do this framework where I am alone and then sometimes we're together?
Yeah, well, I would say I'm really busy and I am really busy. I know everyone's busy. We all have the same amount of hours in the day. And so then really it goes back to self-determination. Yeah. We all get to choose what we do with those hours that we have in the day. And I have a lot of things that I really love doing. And this is a space that I want to step in at times and try to be helpful in and share my story in. But it isn't the main actor in my life right now.
Right.
And so I'm at a stage in life where my family is most important. I have kids that are growing up and moving out of the house, and I want to spend as much time as I can with them. And I still, on top of that, have a really busy job. So this isn't my job. And so I'm a financial professional. I focus on that space. I'm a corporate executive, and that's really demanding, and I really like it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that we have settled on we both have different roles, and I really appreciate that you know where you want to spend your time, right? And I have felt more called to this work and to spend my time here. This is my career. I felt very much like God had prepared me for the information you were going to share. And part of that was through my education, and that He really wants me to share this. So that's why I'm making it my career, my space, and it's not yours.
mhm.
But your story is what, essentially pushed me into this field. I call him my muse sometimes, or, I couldn't or I wouldn't be in this space without you. So I feel like your voice is really important here. So I'm really glad you came today.
Well, I'm very happy to be a part of it.
And the hope is that Daniel will be on about every fourth podcast. I don't know if you've committed to that yet.
I will definitely be around and be on it. I don't know how often.
Right.
I can
So,
probably do that.
so we will mark the Daniel episodes because I do think that they're going to be really impactful. And I appreciate you being here today.
Happy to do it.
That concludes this episode of the Complex Couples podcast. I appreciate you all joining today and hope that if you have any questions or if you're interested in receiving more information about how to navigate this area of your life, that you will go to my website. It's www.complexcouplescoaching.com. You can fill out a form there to submit your email, and feel free to reply with questions or things you would like me to ask Daniel or things you would like me to discuss. And I will see you next time. Thanks for being here.